Hi guys, welcome to Learn with W3Schools. My name is Dr. Zeeshan and today we're going to start React course. Today we're going to talk about React.js in 10 days. So this is going to be an extensive 10-day course in which we're going to practice as much as we can about React using W3Schools website as a reference for our learning material. Now, I'm not being sponsored, neither is this an official W3Schools website tutorial. I just love using this website, so I'm using it for reference so that you can easily access the reference materials as well and follow along with me all the information, examples, and codes that you're basically using. So without further ado, let's start learning React.js using W3Schools website. If you are here for the first time, don't forget to subscribe this channel, please. I am going to post lectures on React, JavaScript, Python, Java regularly, almost twice a week. I'm posting every day. So this will be a very nice and informative channel for you to learn programming if you follow along. Okay, so today is day one of React.js. We're going to learn basics of React, how to install React, and all the introduction to the React what we're going to discuss. Without further ado, let's begin. So let's begin with React. React, as you know, is a JavaScript library. Do keep in mind, React is not considered as a framework. It is specifically known as a library. There's a difference between library and framework. We're going to discuss more about this later on, but means it contains JavaScript functions or JavaScript-based functions that allows us to build a user interface. Okay, that's why it's known as a library. It's not defining a whole new set of rules and regulations. Okay. React is used to build a single applications using JavaScript. So technically, it is using JavaScript at the back end. As a library, it's allowing us to create new single applications. React allows us to create a reusable UI components. Now that is the major advantage of it. It is a JavaScript library, but at the same time, it has the one major feature that we call reusable UI components. So what we do is we say that it has these three major functions. It's a JavaScript library. It allows us to build a single application pages. And then the most importantly, it allows us to create UI components. Okay, so these are reusable. Reusable means consider them as a building blocks. You create one block, you create second block, you create third block, and then you can combine all these blocks together in a one giant application. And then even if you build a new application, then you can reuse the same blocks in that application as well. So that's why the advantage is there. It is allowing us to reuse the components that you can use in different applications once you design them. And that's the major popularity. Also, keeping in mind the React is being developed by Facebook, right? So it's being managed by Facebook, and that's why it is so popularly used. So entire Facebook and all these technologies are actually using React. And hence, all the components that you see on your Facebook pages are all separate components built using React, and they can be reused at multiple different locations as they go along. Okay, so this is the basic of what React does, keeping in mind that it allows us to reuse the components developed by Facebook themselves. Let's go into and how do we learn React. So in this case, I'm again using W3Schools website, and we will be using most of the W3 examples and run the code to check the output of the system. Now, this again is using W3Schools browser-based support. We will try to see how we can do that in VS Code as well. I've already shown you how to download and install so that you can use and follow along the same code. So if you are doing in VS Code, you just need to copy this code and create a new app and use this as a hello world instead of the default app. We're going to show you how you do that. Don't worry about that. So anyway, this is how the React is running, and we will be using this as well. Getting more in deep into intro of the React. So what exactly is React? React is sometimes referred to as a front-end JavaScript framework, but more specifically, it is a JavaScript library created by the Facebook, right? So do always keep in mind, it is not a framework. It is always considered as a library. Sometimes this can come up as a questions and in evaluations. We always consider React to be as a JavaScript library, not as a framework, right? And it is created by Facebook, hence all the technologies are managed by Facebook themselves. React is a tool to build UI components. So that's one of the primary purposes. It allows us to create a single page-based UI components that you can reuse. So that's the whole idea. So if you have a page, for example, if this becomes a UI component, you can reuse this UI component entirely in a different situations. If you have this tab menu as a UI component, you can use this entire tab as a reusable component that you can use in a different applications. How does React work? React creates a virtual DOM memory. Okay, so document object model is created inside the memory that allows us to work with this React components. Okay, instead of manipulating a browser DOM directly, React creates a virtual DOM in memory where it does all the necessary manipulations. before making the changes in the browser window. So this is what it does. So just like a JavaScript DOM model, JavaScript creates what we call a browser DOM. So instead of creating a browser-based document object model, React creates a virtual DOM in the memory, and then it does all the necessary manipulation inside the memory before that changes are actually shown in the browser. That's why it is considered as more efficient and has those more components that can be used on multiple different places. So React only changes what needs to be changed. It is what we sometimes consider as a built-in Ajax kind of a thing, where you only are changing what you need, not everything is not being changed. If you just need to change one single component, that component is auto refreshed or the page remains same. React finds out what changes you have made to the and the changes only what needs to be changed. You will learn various aspects of how React does this in the rest of this tutorial. So do follow along and keep and watch till the end. So we're going to discuss all these major aspects and how it is being done and how it's being saved in the memory and so on and so forth. Okay, so the React was launched in around, I think, 2013, initially released to the public in 2013. Currently, we are using the VS latest version from April 2022, but I'm using latest version 24. I don't know exactly which version that would be. So you can use that as well. Okay, getting started. Now, we have already talked about how we can download and install the React thing. Okay, but there are two ways of doing it. You can use React directly in HTML. So to use React, you need basically npm, which is a Node.js based structure. So we will be downloading and installing this in a moment. However, you can use React directly in a browser. So you can come here and include this in your browser. So you can write the code directly in your browser and use the React code from there without actually installing the npm. But we always recommend and prefer to use npm mechanism as well. So W3Schools has this mechanism to do that. Again, you need these three script CDN files. You need to incorporate them in your code. Then you need to go and write the script code that has the function hello world that prints the hello world, and then you create the container and the root values as you go along. We're going to talk more about this later on. So you can use the browser. However, it's always better to set up an npm React environment. So let's just go and see how we can do an install. Now, the most important thing when we want to learn React is first being able to understand how we download and install React. Okay, so now we're going to understand that how we download the npm, which is again Node.js structure. We need the Node.js in order to install and work with this React framework. My name is Dr. Zeeshan. If you're here for the first time and want to learn React, today we're just going to show you how you install and work with the React. Whereas in next class, we're going to cover the entire complete course of React. So don't forget to subscribe and follow along. So let's get into it, how we install and Node.js and enable the React.js project using VS Code. Let's begin. So in order to download and use React, first thing you need is Node.js. Node.js basically is an open source cross-platform JavaScript runtime environment. It allows us to run JavaScript outside of the normal HTML and browsers. Okay. So in order to download it, just go inside the nodejs.org and download the default package. Okay. Once you do that, in my case, I'm downloading the Mac version, or you can do the same for the Windows version as well. Once you do that, open it up and run the installation package. Okay, as soon as you do that, the installer pops up. Click on continue, read all the license agreement. Zoop, I did all that and click continue. The continue installation software, you must agree to the terms. So we do agree with them absolutely without any hesitation. And then let's just click on install. So I'm going to leave the default installation folder. If you're doing on Windows, again, leave it on the default. It's always better. Then click here, provide the password needed. That's it. So it will install the Node.js in your system. Once it's installing, make sure you have already downloaded VS Code. Okay, we would be using VS Code for future references. This will use VS Code and it makes things a lot more easier. Once this is installed, and make sure it's available in your local path in your Windows. Once it is done, click OK and allow installer to access download folders and just remove the default installation. Once it is done, open VS Code. And again, if you need VS Code, you can go inside the browser and search for VS Code download. It's a free software, freely available. You can use it. It's wonderful for programming. All my video lectures are based on VS Code. Got it? So once you have a VS Code installed and running, you can use VS Code for the terminal purpose, or you can open up your own default terminal and use that as well. Okay. So here we can type in node -v in your terminal and it should give us the version number. Okay. So if you're using Windows, use command prompt, or if you're using Mac, you can use terminal window. Okay. Once you type in node v, it should give you the Node version, that means your node has been installed, and Mac or Windows now recognizes how it's supposed to happen. So you can open the terminal inside your VS Code as well. I always recommend do that. It makes things for me a lot more easier. So you open up a new terminal window. Inside the new terminal window, now you need to create a new React project. To do that, we use the command npm create, and I type in white@latest. Okay, so this will bring up the latest command. Again, I will leave the commands in the description below. You can check this out. This will basically create a new project. This is a new way or latest versions of how we create the project. The older way of using npm and creating React project is now depreciated. So you need to install following 3 packages. If it asks you, say yes, we need to install these packages and let it wait. It will create and install these packages. Now it's going to ask us for the project name. Okay, so if I move it up, so it's going to ask us, hey, what's your project name? The default every project we start is called my react-app. That's a default project name. Again, not necessarily give any project names you want. Usually you find this is the first project name that people tend to use. Okay, so I can say my React app becomes my project name. Then it asks me, hey, what framework you are using? Since we are using React, you can go for React, or if you go for any other works, if you're learning that, you're welcome to do that. Currently we're just working on React, so I'm just going to select React with the arrow keys, press enter. Then it's going to ask us, hey, are you going to use TypeScript or JavaScript? So I'm going to just say, I'm just going to use the standard JavaScript. Select the JavaScript using arrow keys, press enter. Voila, that's it. It's going to do the installation. And now it says, hey, everything is done. Now you need to run these commands to run the program. Okay, to do that, we're going to type in cd, for example, my react-app. So what cd means, go to this my React app directory. So if you type this in, it should take us to my React directory. If it is not taking us to my React directory, that means that it's not able to find my React directory, which because I misspelled my to nai. Make sure you spell it correctly. My React app. Voila. So now we see it says my Zeeshan, my name, my React app. So it basically means it's working. Thank God, right? Now npm, and we just type in install. So this should install the npm files necessary within my React project, and just give it a few moments. Done. So once it is done, it will install all these required packages and files within your npm project. Once it is done, now we need to run the npm server. To do that, we use npm run dev. Okay, so npm run dev is the command that we use to run the server, and once the server is up and running, it should give us white 5.4.1 or whatever the version you have installed. This is the latest version we just downloaded. Once it is there, we get the local server host name. Okay, so this becomes now our local server. Copy this, go to your browser and type in your URL, press enter. You should see white React app page. So this is a demo app page that we will get by default by installing the demo application. Then just simply click on the React button, and you will find out that it has a very simple counter. Okay, we will be developing counters in ourselves later on with some few more advanced features, but there you go. So now your React is working perfectly done, and that means that you can begin working on the React project. That's all it takes. So just in case, if you close the server and if you close the browser, everything again. So for example, if you shut it down and then you want to come back to it, all you need to do is go back into your new terminal and then type in cd my react app. So it should take you to the my React app. Making sure you are in this project, just type in npm run and then dev. Okay, so this is the command again when we used initially. So we move to our current project folder and we type in this command, and it will restart the server. And then you can easily recopy or just refresh the page, and you should be able to access your VS server again. So if I recopy it, go to my browser and then click on enter. See this, the React app is still working. Perfect. So now it means we have already set up the React and everything is working and wonderful. Next, we can open up the project in our VS Code. To do that, click on open folder, go to your project's directory where you have created the folder, or in my case, I've just created in my Zeeshan's folder. I can see my React app, and then I just click on open. Okay, once we do that, now we have all the current relevant React files and we can start working with our React project. Just a quick intro, node modules will contain all the necessary module files that we need for React. Usually we don't tamper with them, we just leave them as it is. Public folder contains all the public assets. For example, white SVG, the image that we see here is basically coming from here, which is a URL. If you use this, it basically means it's a public folder. The files will not be compressed and bundled with your final output. So they will be always remaining public. So we usually put on the public URLs here. That's what you actually see here. See this, the URLs are here. Then we actually will be working 99% time in this SRS folder. What we do in the SRS is actually, this is a source folder. All our React and CSS and files basically go inside here. Within this, again, we have an asset folder that contains the React SVG. Assets and publics are similar, but public files will be publicly separately available, and usually that's why we just leave the URLs inside it. Assets, all the files will be actually bundled together and packaged with your final project. So all images, videos, all graphics that you want to put in your project, usually we save it inside assets folder. Then we have what we call our main JSX. JSX stands for JavaScript XML. I have already a detailed video on XML and how we use XML for that. So if you want to learn more about it, do check the channel out. Main.js is basically your main starting point. It's like a main JavaScript. This is where the code starts to work in terms of React. And we have in this what we call an app that we have imported. Again, React works with respect to modules. So this is an app module that has been available here. This app module has been actually imported from this app, this line. If you check it out, there's a file called app.jsx, which is JavaScript XML. So this is our app module that has been created, which we can see in this example here. So this is actually the whole app module that uses the counter and everything. Okay, so this main becomes our this file. Again, there are two CSS attached. This app module has its own CSS, and the main file that we are using, which is the main starting point, like a main function, uses its own CSS file, which again is used for design purpose. Then we have an index.html. We know that every server needs the starting point. So that's the first thing that we do when we load up the files is actually index, and from the index we start our system. So index, actually you can see, has a div ID called root, types a module, and then it loads the main JSX. So that's what index all does, right? The whole purpose of index is to load up this particular file, okay, main.js. So actually the code starts from here with JavaScript, with JavaScript React. Got it? Wonderful. So I hope you understand this. Now, in next classes, we're going to delve much deeper into React. So don't forget to subscribe and follow along if you want to learn React completely with me using W3Schools. And we're going to talk more about this in next class. Okay, guys. So welcome back. Now, let's go. Once you have understood and downloaded it, let's just go here and talk more about React's ECX. Okay, so what do we ECX? Now let's begin talking more about what React is and how we work with that and how we then deal with various different things inside React. Now ECS is basically ECMA script 6. It is the latest version of JavaScript as a whole, what we are talking about and what we are actually working with. So as a whole JavaScript, we are using the latest version, which is considered as ECS 6 or ECMA 6. Okay, so it stands for ECMA 6. ECMA script was standardized JavaScript, and ECA is the sixth version of the latest ECMA script. It was published from 2015, I believe, 15-16, and is still known as ECMA 2016 script. Okay, so this is what it is. It's a what we call a standardized. It was created to standardize JavaScript. That was main purpose. Why should you learn the ECX? Oh, now this is a big long debate. Let's gonna go and talk about it. So React uses ECX 6, and you should be familiar with some of its new features. So all the new major features in React. So if you have to learn React, you have to understand ECS 6. You have to understand the JSX, and third, you have to understand how to use HTML and CSS. These are three things basically you will be required to understand. To do that, let's start with the ECX and see how and what are the major things that we can do in this thing. Okay, so if you come here, first thing we need to understand and go is React classes, ECS classes. So React ECS 6 classes. ECS 6 introduces classes in JavaScript. Class is a type of function, but instead of using a keyword function to initiate it, we use the keyword called class, and the properties are assigned to the constructor method. So hence we create a word called class, char, bracket start, bracket close, and then we need to create a default constructor. This becomes a mandatory thing. Okay, so if you want to learn more about JavaScript classes, I already have put a detailed tutorial on JavaScript classes, specifically talking only about JavaScript classes in ECS 6. So don't forget to check out the description. I will leave the video down below. So with ECS 6, the first major change we got was that it used something called classes. Okay, so that's one thing to keep in mind. And again, because of this change, React also focuses on the classes. So notice the case of the class name. We have to begin the class name car with an uppercase letter. So do always keep this thing in mind. This is a standard naming convention. It's not an absolute rule, but it's now a standard naming convention. Even in Java, if you're creating a class, or C Sharp, you're creating a class, it's a naming convention that the class must always begin with a capital letter and function must always start with a small letter. In this case, we have a capital car and then we create a constructor. Constructor is a default method or a method that actually is executed when we create an object of this class car. Okay, so now you can create an object using the car class. So we go inside constant my car, which again is declaring a variable, declaring it as a constant, which is also a standard practice. Then we use the new keyword. New keyword here specifies that I'm creating a class of this object, new class of new object of this class. And then we use car as a class name, and then we give it an argument called Ford, because the constructor here is taking an argument called name, which will be assigned to this brand name. What we're doing now is we're saying, hey, I have a class called car and I want to create a new object of it. I use a new keyword which creates an object, and I use a car word which is here, and then I pass it an argument. This because of this argument, it will call this constructor. Okay, this creates a new object in our sense. Now using this new object, I can access and work on these methods all along. The constructor function is automatically called when object is initialized. Okay, so methods in class. Similarly, you can declare custom methods in your class as well. To do that, we again use a simple method name, bracket start, bracket close, and provide the functionality inside it. Then to use this method, we again, once we have the object, we use myCar.present. This allows us to access this method here. Now do note that because this is considered as a method in a class, it does not use the word function. Previously in standard JavaScript, we always begin the word with something called function. Okay, and that function allows us to use define it that it's a function. However, when we use a method, see this, there is no word function, because this now is considered as a method that has been declared inside a class. That's how it basically is considered. That's why now they use a word method. Technically they both the same thing, but within now JavaScript ECS6, we call function, that is a part of pure JavaScript. We use word method when it belongs to classes and it does not begin with a function. Do keep this thing in mind. That's why it's important to understand the CCX. Then we have something called class inheritance. You can inherit because classes are there, hence within the OOP principle, inheritance is quite important. So we can also inherit classes within this system. It says in order to inherit the class, you will be using again the word called extends. If you're coming from JavaScript, you would find this word familiar. In JavaScript also we use extend. This means that this class data is now being inherited and becomes part of this class model. Hence, model will be able to use all these data simply. Okay, meaning that it has been inherited. So it now becomes class model, becomes a child class of class car. So all this data is now inherited by this model class. Hence, the model class is able to use this dot present, which actually exists inside here. You understand? So now moving further, we have something else called arrow functions. Now, arrow functions are very important with respect to React, because React heavily depends on this arrow functions. Arrow functions allows us to write a shorter function syntax. A typical short function syntax would be that we define the variable or a function name is equals to function bracket star bracket close, block star block close, and we use a return hello world. What this does is it allows us to return a certain value. So now this is a standard function. However, when we talk about with arrow functions, we just simply use hello. The word function is removed and we use this equal to angle bracket, block star, block close. Hence, simplified version. Okay, so the word function actually is removed and just the arrow symbol has been included here. The function name is there. So it gets shorter if the function has only one statement and the statement returns a value. You can remove the brackets and use the return keyword. So for example, if it is even just this one single line, actually I need to do. Okay. So if I am supposed to return a single value, then I can write this even in a shorter way. I can say hello is a function name is equals to function brackets. Because of these brackets, it would understand that, hey, I'm creating a function. Then I use this arrow. That's what we call them arrow functions, because instead of writing a name, we define this arrow shape and we just wrote the hello world. What this will do, it will do exactly the same thing that this guy did here. Okay, so it's going to do exactly the same thing even in a shorter manner. So it is going to return hello world. Okay, so wherever we call this function, it's going to return that hello world to us. So this one line function becomes what we call an arrow function because of this arrow, because there is no function keyword used here. Okay, if you want to try this code out, let's click on this one, and you would see that we have an implicit return value. So if I use it, I can use hello world equals to a function, an arrow sign, and a hello world. And then when I call this function, I will just simply say document.getElement by id.innerHTML and call me this hello function. Remember, this is a part of ECS6, means it's actually now part of JavaScript, not specifically dependent on React alone. So this is not React code. This now is actually a JavaScript code, but React actually uses this heavily. So it's quite important to understand these functions as well. Similarly, we here have arrow functions in a very different way. This works if the arrow function has only one statement. So if this works only if the arrow statement has one function. So if you have parameters, you pass them inside the parenthesis. So again, in the same way, if you have parentheses, arguments, you just pass them or those parameters inside the parentheses. That's it. Block function block flows, and it works like that. So we have a function name is equals to bracket star bracket close. Now there is no function keyword within the arrow functions. If there are arguments or parameters, we use those parameters variable value here, comma, as a normal function. Then we use the arrow function, and then we pass the string plus value. Again, this is specific to if it has only one statement. If it needs to have more statement, then we follow the previous structure where we use bracket star block close, because block would indicate that there are more than one statement. If there's only one statement, then there is no need, and that statement needs to return value, then there's no need for a block. Okay. Then what about this? So this keyword is also part of our ECS. So the handling of this is also different in arrow functions compared to the regular functions. In short, the arrow function, there is no binding of this. Whereas in a normal function, there is always a deep binding of this function. So in the regular function, this keyword represents the object that the function is being called from, which could be the window, the document, or the button or whatever. However, with arrow functions, this keyword always represents the object that defined the arrow function. Okay? So in a regular function, this keyword represents the object that called the function. Whereas in arrow function, this always represents the object that defined the arrow function. Right? So let us look at the two examples to understand the difference. Both examples call a method twice. First, when the page loads, and once the user clicks on a button. The first example uses a regular function, and the second example uses an arrow function. The result shows that the first example returns two different objects, window and a button, and the second example returns the header twice. Right? So the first example is here. With a regular function, this represents the object that called the function. What do we mean by that? So we have a class called header, and we created a constructor of it, this dot color red. Then we create a regular function which is basically change color is equals to function block start document dot element by id, and we just use the word this. Now it means that take the current value, right, and then find me the data. So we say, okay, once I call this function, I go inside constant, I create my header is equals to new header, which is an object of this class. So we call the object of this class constructor. This is being called here. Then we say window dot add event listener, add an event, load my header dot change color. Okay, so we need to see when the color has been changed. A button object calls the function, meaning that a document dot get element by id button, add event listener click, my header dot change color. So when I click on a button, go to this object, my header, and then call this function called change color, this one. To view this example, we have the complete code. So now we say, okay, how do we go for it? We have a standard HTML. We have a button called click me that has an ID called button, which will be actually used here. Then we create a p strong. This strong represents strong. Again, a paragraph that has some text on it. Then again, a paragraph called ID demo that will be used again. Yeah. So now see the difference before and after the button is clicked. So to see the difference before and after button is clicked, let me just click on this and see this object HTML. So every time we click on button, it says object HTML button is pressed because of this thing. Because we have a class
Then we say add event listener, load myself header change color. So when the change color is called, which is actually this one change color function, get element by id, and it prints this color here.